The bill banning so-called conversion therapy in Canada received royal assent today, making it into law. It is now illegal to have a child or adult undergo the treatment.
Conversion therapy is a practice that targets LGBTQ+ youth and seeks to change their sexual or gender identities. It has been widely discredited and seen as a form of torture. To talk about the significance of this new law, we welcome to CP24 tonight Nick Schiavo, founder of No Conversion Canada, and Lucas Wilson, a conversion therapy survivor and human rights advocate. I want to thank both of you for being with us tonight. Lucas, I want to thank you for sharing your story. You were in conversion therapy for about 4 years. What did that look like for you, and how would you describe that time in your life?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. I was in conversion therapy at Liberty University, which is the world's largest fundamentalist university. And for 4 years, I underwent their conversion therapy program. And I was, for the most part, in the one-on-one therapy, and this was talk therapy. So I met with a man by the name of Pastor Dane Emmerich, and he was the spiritual advisor, the spiritual leader, who on a weekly basis, we would talk about my sexual life. The meetings first started off with a very pseudo-Freudian approach to human sexuality. I was to talk about my relationship with my mom and my dad, and that was the basis, according to conversion therapy thinking, for me being queer. And so because of my overbearing mom, that was said to be the cause of me being gay. And so according to this thinking, I was told that at a young age, I identified more so with women, with my mom. And then at puberty, I went, I was attracted to that which was opposite of me, which was men. And so every week we would talk about my sexual sort of proclivities. We would talk about my teenage sexual history. And we would talk about what I had done, that according to Pastor Dane Emmerich was quote unquote sinful. And so I had to give this really detailed, humiliating, embarrassing sort of stock as to what I had done that week. And I also had to perform in a lot of ways. I was pushed to present a certain brand of masculinity. I was told to play sports and, do things that men do like carpentry and, other things like that. And ultimately, this, of course, pushed me to live an inauthentic life, a life of secrecy, a life of anxiety, because I was constantly weighing and measuring, how I presented. Was I masculine enough? And over time, I was told, again, that who I am, me being gay, was wrong, that it was sinful, that it was, gross or, not seen, well in God's eyes. And so that guilt I felt for, any sort of slip-ups or quote-unquote sin throughout my time in conversion therapy, that over time I realized wasn't going to change. And that, who I was and how I was acting was precisely who I am. And, when you're told that you're gross, when you're told that, your sin is dirty rags before God, you internalize that and you feel ashamed of who you are to such an extent that I really hated myself for a very long time.
Lucas.
And this, of course, is a function of conversion therapy.
Yeah, and absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this story. I want to point out Liberty University is a U.S.-based school. It's in Virginia, correct? I'm wondering,
yes.
Is conversion therapy still something that is being carried out at any facility at that school, as far as you're aware, considering that the law that's come forward today is Canadian?
Right. Yeah. So conversion therapy at Liberty, I know folks up until 2020 who were undergoing conversion therapy at Liberty. Pastor Dane Emmerich has retired. And so the question is, will this continue to happen on campus? But the truth of the matter is that Pastor Dane Emmerich was not the only person practicing conversion therapy at Liberty. I've been doing a little research. I teach and I'm in academia. And the research I've been doing as of recent has revealed that there were a number of folks who were practicing conversion therapy at Liberty University.
So, Nick, we will get to you. Lucas, I just had one other question. Did you always know that this therapy that was being brought upon you, this treatment, that it was wrong? I mean, was there a point where you felt, oh, well, I must be sinning or doing something wrong here because I'm undergoing this treatment? Did you always know deep down inside, this is wrong?
I didn't. And this was because within the evangelical imagination, there is a dichotomy that's set up for queer folks. Either you accept who you are and live into that, or you accept God and reject the constitutive part of who you are, your sexuality. And so for me, I thought what I was doing was the right thing. I thought that going to conversion therapy was ultimately God's will for me. And so as a result, I went and I willfully went for 4 years until it was only afterwards in grad school that I found out that this was not normal. This was not something that most people go through.
Right. Nick, as we listen to Luke's experience, it's actually so difficult to hear about his experience. Is there a part of you that wonders how it took so long to ban something so painful, so problematic?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, we know that conversion therapy is still happening in Canada. And I am eternally grateful to survivors like Luke, like so many others who have been speaking up. But I think one of the biggest challenges we face here in Canada is making people aware that this is still a practice that is happening today. A lot of Canadians believe that we've either banned it or, it's been eradicated in our communities. But the reality is the most recent data we have from 2021 shows that at least 10% of gay, bi, trans, queer, two-spirit Canadians have experienced conversion practices. And so it is still incredibly prevalent. And I'm hopeful that with the passage of Bill C-4, it will go a very, very long way in eradicating this abuse and making all Canadians a little bit safer.
Nick, in the past, the Conservatives have said they oppose the bill if it's done against a person's will. This bill goes further. It includes consenting adults as well. How important is it to make that distinction and to go that far?
Thank you for that question. I think that is a critical distinction. So, the idea that you can somehow consent to something that is inherently fraudulent, inherently harmful, proven to increase suicidality, and specifically targeted at a minority group in Canada. So that's the other thing, is that when we talk about consenting adults, what we're really talking about is queer adults. We're not talking about everyone because it's only aimed at one subgroup of the Canadian population. So there is no way to consent to torture. We know that these practices are ineffective, but we also know that they're very traumatic. So we were very pleased to see this legislation fill that gap, be much more comprehensive, and protect all Canadians from these practices.
Nick, what is the impact, or Lucas, but maybe Nick, I'll start with you, of conversion therapy? I imagine it takes years for someone to deal with and recover from the trauma of that, if not a lifetime. Already we see what has been an oppressed LGBTQ community historically, not only in this country, but countries around the world. What is the long-term impact?
Well, I'll say this: I am not a survivor, so I can speak from a peer reviewed research kind of perspective. We know that conversion practices increase mental health issues, depression, anxiety. Oftentimes, survivors are struggling with PTSD. Trouble in terms of interacting socially. We know that lifetime earnings are typically lower for survivors of conversion therapy. But I think one of the most shocking statistics, it was done by the Trevor Project in 2019. Through a study of over 25,000 LGBTQ2 youth. And what it found was that those who had experienced conversion practices were nearly 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. And so when we talk about this issue, I think we need to talk about it in terms of life and death. It's incredibly, incredibly traumatic.
Lucas, you are a survivor, so it's only fair to let you answer this question. I'm afraid we are running out of time. So if you can quickly just tell us how this has changed you and what mark it's left on you as a person.
Yeah, I'll put it succinctly. I don't think that you should have to go to therapy after going to quote-unquote therapy. For me, the enduring impact was, again, a large measure of anxiety, large measure of guilt, shame, self-hatred that lasted with me for a very long time.
Okay. Nick Schiavo, founder of No Conversion Canada, and Lucas Wilson, a conversion therapy survivor and human rights advocate. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you both.
Thank you.